Because, well, first of all, for the large public, let's start from my right here, from Brian, but I'll ask others. What is AIT? Artificially intelligence? No? Artificial?
Artificial intelligent traffic.
Oh.
Sorry, artificially inflated traffic.
Okay, artificial
Not
inflated.
intelligent, inflated. So it's basically where people generate traffic that doesn't have a kind of an original sender behind it. Normally there's a person who wants a one-time password. That person doesn't exist. The traffic is simply generated to play with numbers. Yeah.
So this is traffic that doesn't exist, but somebody's paying for it.
Absolutely. So it's the brands pay for the traffic all the way through the system. The aggregators get paid. The mobile operators get paid as this traffic tries to terminate. It doesn't always terminate. Sometimes it's killed before it actually even hits the network. But there is a payment. So it's a fraud where people financially benefit.
Okay, so here we go. It's a business-to-business fraud, but I'm sure you realize that even our consumers in the end will end up paying for that. Tim, what's your definition? Is that similar?
Very similar, yeah, absolutely. It's so artificially inflated traffic, so an enterprise is taken advantage of through a bot or a hack so that they send more A2P SMS than they meant to towards a destination. And as Brian said, either that destination operator is paying out a revenue share to the fraudsters who are generating the traffic, or maybe someone sat in the middle of that delivery chain is short-stopping, faking a delivery receipt back to the enterprise and profiting in the middle. But it's all about financial gain, maybe the odd motive here and there, which isn't purely the financial gain from the flows of the messages and is more around tampering with traffic quality, so conversion rates, for example, to make one supplier look like a poor supplier, so the enterprise then switches over to a different supplier. We see it in that scenario too.
So there's a kind of anti-competitive aspects to that. You're trying to spoil somebody else's result.
You're gaming an algorithm, so some of the enterprises run an algorithm that says, what's my delivery rate? What's my one-time PIN conversion rate? So are the one-time PINs getting used when they are sent out? And they might have 20 different SMS aggregators, CPaaS players connected to them. And then someone starts to game the algorithm, so when they're not supplier number one, they'll send traffic which can't deliver, which doesn't have a real recipient, so that the delivery and conversion rates drop. And then the algorithm goes, oh, I'll move back to supplier number 2 then, who was supplier number 1 before. So it's about winning that traffic back as well.
Okay. Well, Kevin, what's British Telecom experience with AIT?
We've had new experiences of AIT, so I think AIT is here in the UK now. We can see it with healthcare organisations, we can see it with ourselves. So we came under an attack last week. We were probably more fortunate than most to be more educated in the area, which means that we could take really quick actions, but we was also supported by our aggregators. So when EE creates messages to its on-net messages, it can easily deliver that by itself, but it needs partners to deliver on the interconnect. And luckily, we had good partners in place to be able to identify those increases, alert us, and then make sure that we take the right actions. But for us as a network, the thing that's actually, when we move this really quickly, is we refuse to pay. So if money doesn't transfer hands, the fraud can't happen. And from an enterprise perspective or a business perspective, if you identify it, you've really got to dispute the invoice. Don't pay the invoice. Make sure that the networks are aware of it. Disclose it to the networks. Make them withhold the money to the revenue share number. Because if that doesn't happen, BT would have been exposed to hundreds of thousands of pounds. But because if we took this stance of block, refuse to pay, our actual experience is zero, and the fraudsters moved on really quickly because they were informed that they weren't going to receive any revenue payout. So there's multiple ways that it can be done, but it's tough for businesses because they're not experts. They're being abused by the industry to collect these funds.
Well, I think it's an interesting experience, apologies, but so we'll have to stay there for a bit.
Yeah.
How quickly did you realize that the EE brand was under attack, and what triggered it? How did you defend yourself?
So without saying too much, a new solution was implemented, and that solution wasn't publicized to the public, but on the same day that that was implemented, AIT started. So that really questions, are people on your website crawling all the time? Are there insiders in the business looking at it? There's multiple ways to kind of review this. But with the help of the partner, we identified the mobile networks that were involved. Unfortunately, in the UK, it always starts UK offshore networks because the revenue share is bigger on those networks, and then it's then moved on to more virtual mobile numbers in the UK. So without that knowledge, as a normal enterprise, you can't identify virtual mobile numbers. They just look like a normal mobile network number. The same with offshore networks in the UK. They're all +44 numbers. So it's actually very hard for businesses to identify that unless aggregators are educating and putting solutions in place to block that traffic.
Oh, okay. Well, so there must be some players out there ingesting this traffic. Who are they? Anybody here? Well, I think there is a familiar voice from nice to have you back, Eddie. And seriously, so maybe...
Yeah, it's multiple, right? So you're looking at bad actors from an aggregator perspective in terms of trashing two-factor authentication, right? The reality is SMS, AIT, has been here forever. It's just been in really small amounts, and people are doing it to make money rather than trash. The problems come is we've sleepwalked into it as a community. We've created exclusives. We've then pushed those exclusive prices up to 10, 15, 20, 25 euro cent. All of a sudden, a fraudster only has to send 4 messages to almost make $1. So then that makes it much harder to identify AIT because the volumes have to be much lower. So unless we evolve as a community, this problem won't disappear because it's easier to make that fraud.
Yeah, it's a good point in terms of how did we get here. You said we slept kind of, as an industry, we walked into the whole thing, and I think that's kind of true. And because when you looked at it in the early days, in a way, all the players had an advantage as this was happening. So the brands, it would look like they had inflated numbers in terms of accounts being originated. Aggregators were carrying more traffic. Mobile operators were terminating more, and basically there was a money flow. But I think as an industry, and as we're maturing, and as kind of maybe larger players, you can't build a viable industry on fraudulent activity or activity that basically doesn't have anything behind it. You can't do that on inflated figures. And I'm, now there is a realization that this has to stop. The question is, how does it stop? It's almost like a combustion engine. It keeps going until you somehow turn it off. Because there are so many players, and I suppose your experience is on the UK side, but we're looking at a global industry, and different continents look at this differently, and different operators have different motivations, different aggregators have different motivations, different brands have different motivations, but somehow for the viability, the long-term viability of SMS, it does need to be tackled on a global scale, because it is a major threat to SMS. A2P SMS.
Tim, so what do you think that the reason we heard from Kevin very transparently said we're not allowed, but as an operator you can say that the pricing pressure that generated that as well. You mentioned some of the other things as well, competitive, spoiling tactics. Is that it? Is that what happened? Is there more?
So I think, to Brian's point of it being a global issue, I still think, and it's hard to prove, there is actually a smaller subset of people driving this global activity. So if you look at experiences from clients such as the kind of scenario Kevin's mentioned, where it pops up in different operators, it's the same website being attacked in the same manner. You shut down one destination, it goes here, it goes there. So all those different operators' number ranges, sometimes internationally, are being attacked by the same third party, should we say, who's driving that traffic to loads of different operators. The locations that the attacks come from, whether it's through VPN or not, you can start to narrow that down and say they tend to come out of the same kind of territories as well. So although there are multiple players along the way, maybe passing the revenue share along, sat behind that, is it an OCG style actually globally? They're pumping loads of money through
OCG, sorry.
Organised criminal gang, to use some of the earlier lingo. I just thought I'd join in. But is it gang or group? I don't know now. But effectively, is there an organised gang behind it going around all of these businesses? Every time we've been hit, we'll say to an operator, well, who did you want to pay the revenue share to? 9.5 times out of 10, the operator will say, I'm not telling you. And so for us, the trail goes cold. Well, if that operator has nothing to hide, you'd think they would tell us, but they won't tell us. What we need then is whoever they pass the money to say who they pass the money to, because you've got to follow the money, otherwise we'll never really know, to your earlier question, who is sat behind it. There are different motivations. Kevin talked about the more exclusive style motivation, then it's pretty obvious where the money stops. But in these ones with least number ranges and revenue shares, I don't have an answer where it goes yet.
May I say, I've heard before, this is a bit of a happy drug, you know?
Yeah.
Once you got artificial traffic there, operators making more money, aggregators make more money, somebody pays, but there's a lot of happy people. So many happy people that said, wait, is there a bit of complacency, or is there a bit of a, do we let it go as an industry? Because if that's so easy to point at some of those players, why are they not being choked?
I hope we don't let it go, because to Kevin's point, what some enterprises might do, which Kevin's in 30's done, is go to their supplier and go, I'm not paying you for that traffic. So if that's the case, the Infobip or the Sinch or the whoever who's sat in the middle, we have to pay the supplier, as in the operator we terminated the traffic to. If you've got a Kevin sat on the other side saying, I'm not going to pay you, that's fraud, then we're actually left out of pocket in the middle. So I'd say we're heavily invested in stopping this kind of activity, because you just need one big attack. It could be €1 million, and that's a huge dent to a business.
It's a big dent. And what we're also seeing is, as some brands are being attacked, they are actively looking for alternative technology. So WhatsApp or RCS or flash calls, anything, because if you get hit and just use the number €1 million, I mean, that could be the marketing budget for the year gone in a weekend. So it's starting to cause questions about SMS. And we have seen, I mean, we've got a big enterprise side to our business, and we have seen some brands move or look for alternatives. And I think that's the kind of wake-up call. I mean, at the end of the day, the customer pays for everything. So the brand basically pays for everything. And if they move to an alternative technology, that becomes quite a dangerous position for A2P SMS. So, and you kind of, you disrupt a product or a proposition that has a long-term future. And you basically, I suppose, forgo that long-term future for short-term gain. And I think the market is coming around. It just needs to come around faster.
Coming around faster. As I did say, we spent this year trying to tell everybody about it. So I hope it is. And these things, Brian, you refer to, seem to emerge in a lot of the conversation. Is this going to be the end of SMS? By the way, as Meth should be saying, SMS is just one of the technologies out there. Maybe it should have an end, maybe not. But it is a technology that is available for every device in every country, and is delivered for the customers for free. It's got a great value in itself, so let's not throw it too fast. But is this the end of SMS? Are we going to be seeing, really, as you were pointing out, a potential walk away from the enterprises to other things?
I think it's quite a dangerous period for SMS. But I'm hoping that the industry looks at it and realizes that it's not a short-term gain. If prices are reasonable, if the quality is good, if the environment is secure, then this can, SMS has been around for over 20 years. I mean, this can go on for another 20 years plus, because we know that SMS is so effective. But it does have to be a secure, quality environment at a fair price. And I think the expectation, we've had massive, revenue growth in A2P SMS over the last number of years, well into the double digits, 20% growth year on year. That's not sustainable. I mean, no industry is sustainable for 20% growth year on year forever. So there's a realignment that's required from operators, aggregators, the whole chain, in terms of, what is viable, sustainable growth, and double digits probably isn't it. So that needs to happen. That needs to happen as well.
Interesting. Well, talking a bit more about the culpability, if I can. So are we saying that there are some players, or there are multiple players, or do we know how many people are doing it? I mean, companies are doing artificial generated traffic.
I mean, there are multiple players, so I don't think there's just literally one business controlling the entire global ecosystem, but I think the multiple players aren't as many as you might expect. If you look at the varied operators that the revenue shares are flowing through, you would think lots of different players doing this, but I think there are lots of players sat behind those operators who get a number range and negligently onward sublease that number range, I would say. So they're not necessarily complicit, but they're negligent, or they turn a blind eye when they give out that number range, for example. Lots of those, but the real actors generating the traffic in the first place, it's hard to say, but I'd say not too many of them.
Not too many. Kevin, would you agree?
Yeah, I would go back a couple of steps. So when exclusivity started, the first one, to my knowledge, was Grameenphone in Bangladesh, right? And that was Dialog, now a Sinch company, that started it. And everyone was amazed that they could charge 3.5 euro cent in a huge destination. And then that virtually went up to 4.2, 5. And then the other big guys started getting involved. But the problem with that is when you have an exclusivity there, it pushes out smaller players. So smaller players want to come back into the industry. And when prepayments are required, and you look at the percentage of like a loan now is between 10 and 12% right on a business loan. So that even before they can take any profits, they've got to pay the bank loans off to pay this off. And then they've committed to a commitment they could never ever make because they didn't have that industry knowledge. So the problem with exclusives is it's great for the big guys, but it pushes out the small ones. So then the small guys want to compete, and then they overpromise, and then they need to find a way to deliver on that promise. So exclusivity is the fundamental problem with all of the AIT traffic, in my personal opinion. If you removed AIT, had fair competition, then it would actually remove that, because then there's a competition on price. Price comes down. So therefore, it doesn't destroy that industry. And when you look at, will AIT surpass smishing as the biggest thing? Well, no, it's a double-pronged attack, right? So AIT is for businesses, smishing is consumers, and all that's happening is the eroding of trust in SMS from two different directions. So as a community, that can be resolved. Will it be resolved? Probably not, because the market's too saturated with too many players now for that to be a thing. The horse has bolted. How can you bring back something when you start promising networks £6 million a year, guaranteed or per month? It's really impossible to do.
I might challenge that slightly if I can, Dario, if you don't mind. Just so I would say the exclusivity point is right, and they do get it, but I don't think it's entirely the problem, because if we look at the scenario you just told us earlier, where all your traffic was going to +44 mobile operators, I'm not aware of any +44 mobile operator having an exclusive agreement.
This is where there's two different versions of AIT,
yeah,
right? So the AIT that we were attacked with was purely to generate revenue to keep for themselves, right? This isn't a way to do it, and that's been there since forever, right? It's normally small operators wanting to make, individuals wanting to make £2,000, £3,000, £4,000 a month, and they've been doing that since forever. Mm-hmm. They're probably really annoyed that as a community we've come in and completely destroyed their little retirement funds, to be honest, because AIT is really being pushed by the OTP use case. And I would even argue that SMS probably isn't growing anymore. Like when you take that 20% off of AIT, actually we're probably at the peak of our bell or going down quickly.
Yeah, actually, no, it's a good point, because I think the data would suggest that that's where it's at, but I don't think that's where it should be at. So, most A2P SMS is used by large multinationals, the Googles, the Facebooks, those companies. But there's no reason they couldn't be used for a much broader wide set of enterprise. So, there's research to show that only 7% of companies use A2P SMS. And I think what we're doing is, because we've got all these challenges and maybe confidence is eroding, we're going to forego that opportunity of the other 93% who could pick it up. So, this is where the maturity comes in. The industry needs to look at it and think, how do I get 93% of enterprise using it, as opposed to how do I charge 25 pence a message and basically hammer this thing as hard as I can until it basically goes out. So it's a different way to look at it. There is a lot of growth there. It's just it's being stunted.
Short-term greed versus the long-term sustainability, right?
Exactly that. They're trying to milk 4 years where the industry could have lasted for 10 or 15, and the people that are making the money now are going to get very rich. But unfortunately, that's probably not going to be to the wider ecosystem that has thousands of jobs attached to SMS.
Now, time to be slightly positive, more positive. Tell me there is a magic pill that we can take and everything goes away. Still waiting.
Well, so there is ways, right? So, and it's country specific. So there can be regulation on revenue share numbers because, as we say, if you can't get the money out, then the fraudsters won't do it. So if you was to remove revenue share payments, that would resolve a huge amount. If you was to make sure that there's clauses in all M&O contracts to say that the aggregators could withhold the money and put it in escrow. But at the minute they sign the network contracts, and that guarantee that isn't a clause in the contract, right? So there are ways to do this as a community. There just has to be a lot of will there at the same time.
Yeah.
But if we only focus on AIT, that's a huge problem. We need to be focusing on the fraud aspect for consumers, because if the consumers can't trust messaging, the businesses won't do it. Like this, AIT is very business related. The consumer's not unaware of it. They might be paying for it within higher prices of bills and the like, but you need to attack it from both sides.
More
Yeah, I think we're probably both going to say around the same thing, actually, which is I see, most of the major players now, so Infobip, Sinch, for example, have got now machine learning or artificial intelligence-based solutions to detect this kind of behavior. And I think it's what Kevin was saying earlier as well with that example where you can spot it a lot sooner now, at least if it becomes a bigger issue. It flags up, there's auto-blocking, there's manual inspections and all sorts. You can opt in by territories. I think we're all offering a similar service. Definitely there's a marketing bit to get right around that, because we don't want to seem like some sort of protection racket and sell these things and say, well, if you don't pay, you're not protected. But there is a big cost to run them. If you think of all of the, the cloud computing cost and so on, of the billions of messages going through doing the analysis, there is actually a large overhead and teams and development to run it. So it's that kind of double-edged sword, I think, for all of us, which is, do you give it to all your customers? Do you try and sell it? Like, how do we package it up to not seem like we're profiting from the problem, but we want to succinctly address the problem, I guess, and make it go away? And even databases, so I think Prism earlier, I haven't seen that before, to be honest, but some sort of database of virtual numbering, of you need to know a number is not only a live number on a HLR, but it's not a virtual number. As soon as it's a virtual number, you can assign a lot more risk to that number, should we say. And depending on the territory, depending on the operator within the territory, it's very clear or it's not very clear whether it's a virtual number. So to the point of maybe regulation, mandate that virtual numbers have to be listed with a regulator. If it's a virtual number, it should be listed as a virtual number. It should have some sort of identifier, so then we know if we're suddenly sending tons of one-time PIN traffic from a bank towards these virtual numbers, we've probably got a high probability that there's a problem going on there.
Brian, we'll come to a question. I'm afraid we're going to have a lot of questions now. So get ready and a little time. Your 5 seconds about solution.
Yeah, so look at just what Tim said. There is technology, if we have it, other companies have it, Sinch, where we provide this to enterprise and protect them, so that's possible. But also just in terms of, I think when people are looking at commercials and deals and exclusivities, if someone's promising a high price and to double the traffic, I think those kind of proposals need to be questioned.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, let's start with their questions now. We'll go one over there.
I got the mic. I'll go first.
Yeah.
Only one question, I think.
No. Because we all know who the bad actors are, and we all know who the bad actors are for years. We've been talking about this problem for years. You have to punish the bad actors. Great example. In the United States, Sinch and Cineverse control all 10 DLC traffic going into the carriers. They know exactly who the messages are coming from. Turn them off. Block it. And if that means Twilio, block it, because it's short-term gains versus long-term protection to the carriers. As an aggregator, ICV, I did it most of my life, our #1 protection was to the carrier and to the consumers. So if you guys continue grabbing that 40+ billions of dollars in revenue for that short-term gain, this will never stop. You can stop it tomorrow. You have a great product. I remember when you guys were at Adam, you blocked all the stuff going into Myanmar. You guys did a great job. That's what has to happen. And until the industry truly, and that's the Sinches of the world, the Infobips of the world, the Cineverses of the world, Caleras, all those brands, until you start taking this serious and start punishing the bad actors, it's never going to stop, ever. And we talked about this for years. Dario, I remember years we talked about this.
A very direct question. So, can you stop it? Why don't you stop it?
I mean, I think I'm slightly confused by that approach, if I'm honest, because you say block the traffic as it's coming through, but it's coming from the abused enterprise. So the enterprise is that big tech or that mobile operator. They're sending the traffic through us, and we're delivering it to the operator who's onward delivering it to the fraudster. So when you say block them on our platform, you're saying cut off our client and stop their access, which to me, yeah, it's spam, but it's not spam, AIT. That's very different to spam. If it's spam, I agree, yeah. Yep. No.
Can I just to add to this, it's really important, is I fully agree with your approach, but then if we do that, there'll be consumer harm. So I think it's fair to say every single one of BT's partners has carried smishing at some point. If we were to cut them all off, then people wouldn't be able to get their bank alerts for going into their overdraft. No, but if you cut somebody off, you cut them off totally. You can't just say, thank you very much, we don't want your spam, but we want you to keep the good traffic.
But I think there are multiple problems here. We have spam, artificially generated traffic, and in between the other commercial, say, unfair practices. We have one question there. I think I promised a question to a third party, let's see, which is not delivering traffic. We'll go to Simeon first.
Thanks, Dario. Yeah. So I think certainly one thing we've heard is there's several types of AIT. In fact, I would go so far as to say there's at least 7 different types of AIT, each of which has its own solutions and ways of detecting and different beneficiaries. So to at least one of the scenarios, I mean, Tim, you made reference that there's only a few gangs behind some of those scenarios. Would the panel be in favor of, even if not punitive blocking, sort of a name and shame? Who do we see as the source of these problems? They may not be the true originators, but it starts to shine the spotlight up that chain. Would the panel be in favor of like a league table of quality?
Ooh.
I mean, to me, that would be a database of at-risk B numbers. So it's the destination numbers. As I said, we don't know after they've gone to that operator. We don't know onward who the traffic's gone to. So if it's a shared, approved GDPR, ICO, etc., like database of at-risk numbers where we've had AIT, totally in favour. Why not share? And when we can all learn, so if Infobip get hit to some numbers, we can protect ourselves, they can protect from ours, and so on. But it'd have to be governed, to Witch's point, in a way that everyone's happy with and the ICO don't come after us.
Actually, I meant more the other way, aggregators, because we do actually, I think to Kevin's point, when you start to have exclusivity, that's with a relationship. So if we start to see strong correlation between exclusive relationships, particular aggregators start to get the spotlight up that direction.
I think it'd be an illegal battle for forever if you started naming it without any proof. Would be the problem there. From a smishing perspective, we totally agree. And as BT, we are looking to publish who the aggregators are that are sending the smishing, creating league tables, allowing enterprises to build judgments on who they want to work with. But from an AIT perspective, I don't want to be in court for the next 10 years on defamation.
Okay. Yeah. One question there before Brian.
Yeah, okay. So the online question is from Vimal Odedra. I hope I pronounced your name properly. I think it's fairly straightforward for the panel. What percentage of SMS traffic is artificially generated? And are operators and aggregators willing to take action to stop this, knowing this action will reduce revenue/margin?
I mean, the percentage varies. It can be a small amount to 25%, plus. A lot of it depends on how high the price is of ATP in a particular country. So it varies. I'm not trying to dodge the question, but it varies.
Tim?
Yeah, so I would say it varies by operator. So there are some virtual number operators where it's a very high percentage. Most it's a small blended percentage within. Are we willing to take action now at the risk of lower revenues because of it? Yeah, absolutely. And I think Brian and I both referred to it earlier. It's our future as businesses. If we don't take action now, we're not going to have a future. So we totally understand we have a responsibility to do what we can to stop this behavior.
Kevin?
Yeah, I agree. And the problem is we probably don't see most of it as well, right? Because we've had scenarios where a big US tech organization contacted us with a list of CDR saying, did these numbers arrive on our network? The answer is no, they didn't. We can see which aggregator they arrived on, and we then give them advice to actually work with the guys to our left to say, well, we know they're doing the right things, and lo and behold, that AIT stopped within 2 weeks because they weren't getting the traffic to be able to short stop it to make the money. So it's a way networks probably need to communicate better and more effectively with businesses to educate, and BT will do now. We've learned, we've got experiences that we can actually share with a wider business community, and as a leader in that space, we will do it. But who knows how much traffic's just been stopped around the world.
But I think that's a good point in terms of, it's not that we can't do anything. It's very hard to stand up and name and shame because there's legalities around that. But so it's not that we can't do anything, but I think working together as an industry, right from the brands through to the operators is the way to go, so that if there's an incident, it can be investigated. I mean, today you can hit brick walls and you just don't get the information back. But so it is possible to do something. It just requires communication amongst the players.
We didn't hear a percentage. I didn't hear it, but Mobile Square did publish at 20% at one point, which seems to be horrendously high. But here we go. We have one question, and we are over time. Short question, short answer. Right? Go.
Sure. So it's Paul Morris from Vonage. So this is picking up on the same issue, really, about supply chain reputation, supply chain fraud. Totally agree with the gentleman here. Simeon is on the same wavelength as me here. At Vonage, I'm trying to build the concept of a supplier reputation database. So we are building that internally. I want to be able to share that data. Dario, how can the MEF help us with a framework here?
We're here. I like that. And it sounds like we have a working group started. And the guy behind you, probably, which is Nick. We'll talk to him. Yeah. Perfect. Please say yes as an answer. That sounds good. But no, yes? We've got one yes?
Yes.
Oh, that was fantastic. That was
easy. It's easy.
Easy. Thank you very much. We overrun as we did. Thank you, everybody. This is a topic we're going to keep on talking about. As you can see, we heard questions where we're all agreeing with each other. Start online, Andy, Simeon, everybody seems to we got a real push. Thanks here to receiving, sharing your experience has been very grateful. So thanks to Kevin, thanks to Tim, and thanks to Brian. Thank you.